you ready for the incredible sound of classic rock? No? Good, because now it's time for Visiting the Village.
Hello and welcome to Visiting the Village. I'm Paul Kilduff Taylor, and joining me as ever is the boisterous Ian Hardingham.
Yes, I've been spending this week getting the old Frozen Synapse game modes into Frozen Synapse 2, and now I'm tired of that and I'm ready to talk to you.
Let's get out of this dungeon.
It's the top story.
In its most recent investor report, Sony revealed that it has 20.8 million PlayStation Plus subscribers. It also has around 60 million active PlayStation users. That's a lot, isn't it, Ian Hardingham?
Yeah, wow. Congratulations, Sony. This is pretty amazing news. I'm guessing this stat is 60 million active online PlayStation users, or maybe that's incorrect. I'm just kind of wondering how they measure an active PlayStation user.
Yes.
That would be good to know. But whatever that number is or means, 21 million people playing for PS Plus is amazing.
Yeah.
I mean, I don't know what Xbox Live has. I just think that this is an incredible result for Sony, and I think, I mean, really, the way that this impacts anyone very much in the development side is PS Plus free games stuff and PS Plus funding. Obviously you need a PS Plus account to play multiplayer on PS4. So that's going to be a big part of this. I don't know what percentage of this is just down to that, what percentage is down to the free games you get. We've recently seen, I feel like, a bit of a shift away from them offering new games for free as part of the monthly deals and more sort of catalogue stuff. But this is quite the news.
It feels like they've really tapped into a kind of user behaviour that people really want. They just want to know that they're going to have this supply of interesting stuff, and you feel good about Plus. At no point have I ever wanted to cancel my Plus subscription. Like, I've not looked at, if a couple of months go by and there are games that I'm not really that into, I think, oh, that's okay. Eventually, something I forgot to buy at launch, or some weird thing I've never heard of, or some like really cool, quite AAA thing will come up on there, and that's great. So I just want to keep subscribing to it because of that nice, pleasant experience.
Yeah, I think the only question is, is this having an impact on day one sales of indie games on there?
Yep.
And has it reached the point where that's a problem? I guess I don't know the answer to that. Certainly as a consumer, even now that the Vita catalogue is getting pretty dry, I still get a couple of interesting things to look at every couple of months at least, and PS4 is still great. So as a consumer, I definitely can't fault it. I mean, I really feel like this is now the level of success where we have to ask, is this the first successful subscription game product? Because traditionally those have always failed. Again, does this count? I just would love to know how many of these people are only subscribing basically because they desperately want to play multiplayer and the free games are just a plus for them. That's certainly not the case with me, although, I didn't even really think about the fact I wouldn't have been able to play Rocket League online if I hadn't had a Plus subscription. But I don't generally play games online on the consoles. I'm wondering what this means for the world at large. I'm wondering whether Microsoft have any interest in actually trying to do what PS Plus has done with free games, because Xbox have sort of made a couple of vague hand-waving gestures in that direction, but it's nothing like as comprehensive an offering as PS Plus at least has been. I mean, PS Plus is a lot more aggressive than Xbox has ever been in terms of free games. And I feel that may be changing a little bit now. But, I'm just wondering, when PS5 comes around, if that ever happens, is this going to go even further in that direction?
I think it could well do. I mean, yeah, the multiplayer thing really throws a spanner in the works here in terms of judging this as a subscription service. But then the other side of that is just, I think you'd start to see some drop-off, really, if people were only on this to play multiplayer for one game or something like that. It does seem to be really supported by the free games. And that, for me, certainly, and I know for a lot of other people, it keeps it interesting. It means that you feel good about having made that decision constantly. I do think we're going to see this as a feature of new platforms. I wonder, do you think Steam will ever introduce something like this?
Yeah, I mean, it's a great question. I think probably not in the short term. Steam, as we've said many times, they don't like to make a lot of people very upset. I think doing this, just because it would be such a massive change, would actually upset quite a lot of people.
Yeah.
Also, without getting too inside baseball, the extent to which the developers are remunerated for this is quite complicated, and the kind of thing that makes complete sense with a console manufacturer. Exactly the kind of deal that people who are used to dealing with console publishers and console first parties are used to, and probably not the kind of deal necessarily that people are going to be happy having with Steam. I think that it would be very hard for Steam to make this attractive to people, because I mean, again, and I don't think we're voiding any NDAs by saying this, but a lot of the time PS Plus money comes for development, to cover development costs.
Yeah.
And that's obviously not something Steam is going to do, in my opinion. They're not going to start giving significant advances to a bunch of sort of people to develop games for their subscription service. I just don't think that that's what they're going to do. So I'm going to say I don't think this is going to happen. I think it would have to... I still am very down on the idea of subscription services in general. I think it would have to be Steam to make a massive impact on the PC. Yeah. But I kind of don't see it coming across, but that's just my sort of first blush thought.
I'm still interested in Humble's service, and I think that is not trying to be PS Plus, and it's not trying to be what a Steam subscription would be. It's trying to be an interesting, sort of curated thing that you can subscribe to if you sort of like Humble and the kind of things they do. And that makes sense to me. Again, we're sort of still looking for the outcomes there. Like, I don't think anyone sort of knows how that's doing. I know Humble have been kind of trying to add to it and expand it, so it obviously went past their first tests of something they wanted to do. So that's interesting. Yeah, I don't feel like it's something I want on PC, whereas on PS4 certainly it does seem to work. I mean, it's... Getting these additional revenue streams out of people is always a very difficult thing. As you said, there'd probably be a big outcry on Steam if they did it. It's a complicated and difficult thing, but Sony have managed to make it, as I say, feel nice.
Yeah, I completely agree with you about Humble's subscription thing. That's just like a really interesting sort of little curio in some ways. It reminds me, funnily enough, of things like Loot Crate.
Yeah.
Just sort of things that they really buy as kind of an enthusiast, just something fun to surprise you every month. Right. And definitely feels different to PS Plus. I mean, I think that we're once again looking at the very real difference in consuming and being a fan of games on the PC versus on the console. A kind of service on a console makes so much more sense. I'm not going to start enumerating the ways in which these two platforms are different, but they continue to be very different. For me, just because consoles start having patches and start having early access, it doesn't make it particularly closer to the PC experience. The two things are just very different, and I'm extremely happy to have this on the console, and I think that's great. So, I think the multiplayer thing is probably quite important to just wrap this all up, to backing up the idea of PS Plus. I think that those two features, the free games and the multiplayer, work very symbiotically to sort of push you over into this making sense. Like, if you have to pay this subscription because you like playing multiplayer, then you feel much better about it because you're getting all this free content. And in some ways, the other way around is true as well. I mean, maybe Sony are going to try and put some extra benefit to PS Plus subscription to keep trying to grow it. Maybe they'll try and give you free delivery on Amazon products or something like that, or some free movies every month or something. So yeah, I like it.
CD Projekt Red's upcoming collectible card game, Gwent, will handle new card packs slightly differently to other games in the genre, such as Hearthstone. Apparently, players will choose one of 3 rare cards, and then the rest of the pack will be chosen at random as normal. Gwent will also have a fairly lengthy single-player campaign. What do you make of Gwent, Ian Hart?
Right, I'm gonna come out firing on this one. I think this is a really bad idea. Not Gwent as a whole. I think Gwent's a cool idea. This allowing you to choose cards in your booster packs thing. I'm all the way out on this. I think this really undermines booster packs. Like, I don't want to open a booster pack and then have a choice. There's just something about it that really turns me off. I think it's sort of an interesting thing to investigate. I'm not going to go as far as to say that it's impossible that this will be sort of really attractive to people. I don't know enough about Gwent. You know, it's very possible that there's something about their version of Colours of Mana that means that this is much more necessary in Gwent than it is in Hearthstone and in Magic. But in general, that's definitely not something that as a designer that I would want to put in. If I were making a game with booster packs, I would not want you to have some choice when you open them.
Now, on this podcast, a lot of the time, we take opposing positions. I don't want to go as far as to say devil's advocate. I think we usually put some of our own faith, our own belief into our argument. And on this particular case, I want to say that I completely agree with you. I was fully ready to come out on this and just be like, this is nonsense. This completely undermines the whole point of card packs. It's terrible. It's introducing this sort of element of like the hand of the game designer is coming out of the pack as you open it to give you this. No, that's not right. It has to be harsh. It has to be random, and because it adds to the value of these things when you get them. That's the whole point. Putting you through the trial of randomness to get your hands on this glittering prize at the end.
Yeah, and that's what makes it so exciting. And there are other sort of less obvious implications of this. You know, when you print a load of card packs, you have an understanding of how many cards there are out in the wild. Now that you've got this weird choice, you know, are you going to get a point where it starts sort of self-correcting like a market? That at some point a card becomes so rare because no one wanted it to start with, it starts becoming more desirable. You know, moving along from that, and I'm glad we agree on that. I really like Gwent as a concept. It's this very in-depth card game that they put into the Witcher game. So I like that first of all. That's cool. Having a really, really good self-contained like card game within a massive RPG is just awesome. I believe it started out as being like predominantly a collectible thing where you could find these cards all around the world and then you had this cool game you could play with them. And then as the games as they got sequel to The Witcher, they started building up the game to be more of a good game itself. So all of that is completely awesome in itself. I believe there was a lot of complaining that there was far too much of Gwent in The Witcher 3, but I can't speak to that. And then, you know, trying to release it on its own as a free-to-play game, that's just cool. I mean, of course you would want to do that if you had any concept that the game itself was good enough. You look at the success of Hearthstone and Magic, you definitely want to try it. And I have to say, I've got no particular desire to play The Witcher 3. It's just not very high up the list of a long list of games that I should spend some time to play. But I'll actually play Gwent if I can get it on my phone or something. I'd definitely like to try it.
Yeah, on that, I slightly feel that there is something about this which kind of undermines it. If it's a game that's sort of part of a world and you have to go into that world to experience the game, that does have some cool value there, I think. But in practical terms, I mean, it doesn't matter. Like, you still have that feeling when you play The Witcher 3. You don't have to think, oh no, there's this other product out there. So it's just a very sort of high concept reaction to this. Gwent is fun. I mean, it's interesting in The Witcher. It does seem like a very light version of those games. So presumably they would have had to have expanded it. I'm probably talking nonsense now. All of the big witch people come out and say, no, it's fantastically mechanically deep. It felt light to me when I was playing it. Yeah, it's a cool thing for them to try. There is another game, I can't remember the name of it, I saw it on Twitch the other day when I was browsing around, that's basically a Hearthstone clone that people are playing. So this is very firmly the Magic, sort of diet Magic games are now a very firm genre.
Yeah, I mean, I definitely think it doesn't have a particularly high chance of breaking through into being a massive card game. I mean, no card game does. And again, I wouldn't be surprised if it was light. That would make sense for a game that was inside an RPG. But I definitely sort of just like the idea of them doing it. They obviously have enough money to do something like this. And again, I will give it a go. So, card games in general, definitely massive. I don't know if resurgence is the right word. It's definitely a thing a lot of people are doing, because of Hearthstone, because of everything else. I think it's going to be hard to get it right. I think that we're still trying to work out what cards mean in a computer game. I see a lot of card games that use quite in-depth sort of levels as well, and trying to work out when something shifts from being a traditional computer game that happens to use cards to being sort of a traditional collectible card game that happens to take place on a computer is quite hard. And I think I often get turned off aesthetically when people have the wrong mix of those two things.
Yeah.
I'll be interested to see where it goes. I definitely I sort of quite enjoyed playing Hearthstone a bit. I definitely prefer the more hardcore aesthetics of Magic. Hearthstone's a little bit accessible for my taste. So it'd be interesting to see if anything emerges that I really like.
Yeah, one final thing about Gwent that I was just thinking about as we did this item. When I played The Witcher 3, I knew about Gwent in advance. It was in every review, lots of people talking about it, and I came, into the tavern in the game. It's like, oh, this is where you play Gwent. And that was such a terrible introduction to Gwent, because if it was just, something that you happened upon naively, this entire game, and you sit down at a table and it's not just a terrible minigame and you discover it, that was surely kind of the intended way it was presented. It got made into such a big deal before anyone had the chance to have that experience, and that's quite sad.
Yeah, I mean, I'm sure that all of that is completely true, and we can have a conversation for another half an hour about, spoiling the best aspects of games as part of getting people to buy games, because anytime you get something as cool as that, of course you want to talk about it loads, but in a massive world like that, discovering something like that, if it turns out that the Elder Scrolls 6 has a cool card game in it and they don't talk about it, and you have to do some of their crazy plotline to get to it, that'd be great.
That would be great. They should just put Gwent in. Gwent should be in every RPG.
Copy Gwent.
No matter how irrelevant. League of Legends needs some good villains, according to Cassandra Marshall. In a piece for PC Gamer, she makes the case that competitive LoL could learn a few things from professional wrestling when it comes to injecting a bit of drama into matches. Do you think esports should be learning from wrestling?
Well, it's a complicated question. I wanted to talk about this because I think it's like at least an interesting topic, although I'm not totally sure I agreed with the author very much here. I don't know much about League of Legends or many esports, but I felt that there were some heels in StarCraft 2, is that fair to say?
Absolutely, yeah. Yeah,
so it's not like we're missing out on some fairly amusingly trolling professional gamers. An interesting, one of the most interesting things in this article is sort of saying that there's a bit of an age problem here, that a lot of the high level players of games are quite young, and being a heel is going to give them a lot of even more sort of emotional difficulty from social media nonsense. But I guess that's the battleground you choose if you decide to have an overt personality.
Yeah. This I also didn't connect with this very much. This is a sort of reconfiguration of the you need more player biography thing, basically. Which is just something that has dogged recent esports for a long time. Everyone's saying you need to establish a narrative. Establish the narrative and player biography. They're two sort of things people harp on forever. And there are some reasons why you can't do that. One of them is that the people who really understand these games know all this stuff anyway, so you can't package it for them in a way that makes sense. You can't have like a package about why Naniwa is an idiot, because if you watched what he did in GSL, you would know he was an idiot, and you bring that in, and you can't convey that to new people quickly. You can't sort of set that up. There are some things you can do, but it's all very light. So that's the main problem here. Also, obviously, there's a key sort of problem in this argument, which is that wrestling, they design these dynamics, and the dynamics are that the entire thing about wrestling is these dynamics, and they do arise organically in sport, and you have to accentuate them with how you present it, but you can't have the same thing. And also, LoL is difficult because it's a team game. identifying what one person is doing and linking that to a kind of personality is pretty tough. So again, you have to be very much sort of into the scene to get anything from that.
Yeah, I guess I formed an opinion while you were talking, which is that pro sports should run away from WWE in terms of what they're, trying to improve their product. I don't think being more scripted and more theatrical in that way is a particularly good idea. I think that they're too different. I mean, the two ways that you really tend to inject drama into a sport. The first and by far the most important is you just have an awful lot of money riding on it. The more important something is, the more drama there's going to be, and money basically is going to be why something's important. And the other thing, I think there's probably a question of, what the game is actually like. You talk about a team game. The more individualistic a game is, and a team game can be very individual. You can have a basketball player, for instance, hugely individual achievements. The kind of makeup of what kind of game it is will decide what kind of people are good at it. And sometimes you get certain kind of people who have certain kind of skills who are more likely to be interesting, shall we say. So I don't think that they should do any scripting. No. I don't think they should try and overly dramatize it, because I think in some ways, and this is not a comment on WWE, but if you did it for esports, I think it would be admitting defeat. It would be sort of admitting that you can't get the drama through the actual game, and I think you can. I mean, I'd much rather talk about the European soccer teams buying esports teams and what that means and the controversies to do with that than I would talk about any of WWE's storylines. So it's already somewhat there.
Yeah, I think that there's one sort of particular problem here, which is just a bit weird pertaining to this, and that is really that it's so difficult to get the right kind of drama here. I mean, thinking about kind of how it happens in other sports, if you think about tennis, like the tennis stories that have emerged from Wimbledon, a lot of them are like people really acting up in ridiculous ways, like that Spanish guy who was screaming at the umpire yesterday. That's been on the mainstream news. People were talking about it on Radio 1, like they know his name because he did something outrageous that's effectively breaking the decency standards of the game, right? And McEnroe and all of that. So there's that. And the problem with that in esports is that is amazingly discouraged. In this move to kind of sanitize everything in order to take it forward to sort of mainstream broadcasting, you will basically get banned for life now if you behave like that. Certainly if you behave like it consistency. If there was a guy who was playing LoL who smashed his computer and then jumped off the stage, that would be amazing. It would get huge news coverage, but no one will ever do that. So they've kind of put themselves in this weird double bind. They're trying to have this mainstream appeal, but they've sort of sanitized everything to make it so bland that might not happen.
Yeah, and I mean, I completely agree with all of that. And, tennis itself is one of the least sort of dramatic of all of the really popular sports in a lot of ways. You don't get as much nonsense going on there. And I think maybe even more fundamental than the things I already mentioned, it's just a genuine problem that you're not seeing the players enough. And I know that you're seeing their faces a lot. I understand that they're doing that. But, I definitely think there is a problem where you're not attaching enough of your own sort of, you're not projecting enough storyline and narrative and drama onto the individuals, and that needs to be ratcheted up as much as possible. Now we're in the middle, or right at the beginning of the NBA free agent period, and this is awesome because this leads to some amazing, like completely legitimate but also completely circus-like things happening. This is the point where the really big free agents visit a bunch of different teams and have those teams pitch to them why they should go and sign there. And nowadays, what always happens is that the 2 or 3 biggest players at those teams then take the guy out and do something crazy. Like, they show him the best New York has to offer. And of course, the storylines about what happens are always amazing because you have a bunch of guys who you already think are pretty funny. You've already attached an awful lot of different kinds of emotion and drama to, and they're interacting with each other in weird ways. And of course, Carmelo Anthony has some crazy ideas about what you should be doing in New York to try and get Joakim Noah to go there. So, we seem like we're a long way off anything like that happening. But sometimes really circus-like stuff can happen just emerge completely organically from the situation and not have to be scripted.
Yeah, attempts to sort of follow stuff behind the scenes, I think, a bit more can work, and they certainly did try some of that in StarCraft. I don't know what the situation is with League of Legends, but that kind of thing where you really do, you actually establish people's personality. You have to accept that a large number of the players are going to be boring people, and then move on from that to find the ones who aren't. I mean, that does kind of happen, but yeah, the accessibility barriers in esports are still so high, and they also, cause a problem with this. So it's difficult to access the personalities as well.
Yeah, I mean, it's something as simple as, and again, you can tell me if I'm off base on this, but I don't think we have enough time to see the players respond to, killing someone in a really silly way. It's so hard being an esporter. You've got to be clicking so many times that if you've just sort of, done some hugely impressive and embarrassing play in StarCraft 2 on an opponent, but it's not the end of the game, it's just something that's happening in the middle of the game. In a lot of other sports, you get a bit of time to see a legit reaction from the player who's just performed this feat as they go back to the dugout or jog back to midfield. And you see, obviously, some expressions on the esports guys' faces, but they so quickly have to move their attention back onto something else. It's good to see that.
It was, again, it did happen. It was rare, but when it happened, it would sort of normally turn into a massive community thing when someone did have a visible reaction. So that does exist. There was, there were a lot of jokes about a lot of the very impassive Korean players. That was more of a thing in StarCraft 1, that the Korean players would not show any emotion at all when anything happened, and that became sort of something that they were encouraged to change quite a lot. And then the more sort of characterful Korean players within that scene definitely got a huge following in the West by things like showing emotion and saying sort of non-obvious things in interviews. So that stuff, it does happen, but yeah, it's a challenge that esports has.
Yeah.
Gifting has been disabled for CSGO for the duration of the Steam Summer Sale. According to Valve, this helps to grow the community as gifties don't tend to stick around, but others believe it's actually about preventing smurfing and the resale of gift copies. What do you think about this?
Yeah, I love Valve, as everyone knows, but I'm not totally sure I buy their explanation here. I definitely think this could easily be an experiment to see whether they should not allow gifting of any games, or at least promote it to developers as a very real option. I think that this could easily be a big move in the battle against G2A.
Yeah, I think you could be right. It's a very Valve thing to roll out something as a big test on one of their key games. I think that's right. And given that the justification that they've made here, I think that would be compatible with that justification as well. Not sure about this thing about preventing smurfing. That seems to be... Yeah, that's quite high on the list of some players' concerns with stuff. There's always
I could definitely buy that as well. I don't know anywhere near enough about CSGO to know how much of a big deal that is, but I think developers of big multiplayer games would like to not have a smurfing problem.
Yeah, not sure about that one. Yes, and as an approach for tackling resale. Yeah, it could well be that. I mean, there's definitely a lot happening there, as we're going to talk about later on.
Yeah, I mean, just to be completely clear, this is very effective for resale, because when you're buying for yourself, Valve are able to use the full-on protection of immediately attaching the game to your account.
Yeah.
In a way that stops resale, basically. And when you buy gift keys, they can't. They're still using some interesting systems, but it's basically a thing that GTA can sell at that point. So this is definitely an effective method.
Yeah. Yeah, gifting is... I mean, we've used gifting on all of our games so far, and it's something that's it's important for us to be able to do that with the kind of games that we make. But also, we are seeing a lot of the big downsides of that now. Having loads and loads of keys for your game around, as some might say predictably, can cause loads of problems. And Valve certainly are a company who would want to control things like that. They don't like when something very large scale gets out of their control, understandably. I've always thought Valve have been incredible with their approach to facilitating developers distributing their games elsewhere. It's been one of their key pro-developer stances that they didn't need to take, but did. So maybe this is just about, as you say, controlling that.
Yeah, I mean, I don't think GTA is going to stop us, is going to force us to not have free keys for Frozen Synapse 2 when we're not on sale, because if we're selling Frozen Synapse 2 for $25 or $30, you're probably not going to see G2A buy a million of them and sell them at half price, probably. And I mean, we'd have to keep an eye on that. But I think it's really during the severe flash sales that even us would have to consider not giving a free key during a sale. But maybe that's too much of an important part of our offering.
It's very difficult. I mean, generally, developers are not doing sort of free keys with every purchase now. That's something which is not being encouraged in general. So it's very difficult if you want to do that as part of your game. And it also hurts. There are some games where you have 5 packs and stuff like that, which are very popular. It doesn't work for every game, but it does for some, and this could really threaten that. So this is a shame. It's a shame that this has been sort of threatened. But, it's Valve. What they'll do is they'll go out and they'll find the data from this, and if it works, they'll keep doing it. If it doesn't, they won't. So it's good that they're in there testing it.
Yeah, I still think, I want to reiterate what I said last week. Steam as a platform is going to be able to solve this. I'm basically certain that they are going to find the right method. They've got so much power. They've got access to your accounts. They know what your purchasing history is. There's so many different tools they can use. Where this just really causes a problem is for the other distributors, because the other distributors do not have the power or the tools to solve this.
Yeah. Whore of the Orient, the provocatively titled game from LA Noire director Brendan McNamara, has reportedly been cancelled. One of the game's producers, Derek Proud, said in an interview this week that he doesn't believe the game will ever be released. What do you make of Whore of the Orient?
I guess this is sad. I'm pouring out some whiskey right now in the memory of Whore of the Orient. Mm-hmm. I never even played LA Noire. It was such a controversial game. Ended up sort of actually reviewing reasonably well.
Yeah.
This looked cool. I mean, there was a lot of bad stuff going on with the development of LA Noire, as I remember. But I actually kind of like Mr. McNamara's sort of visions. He's definitely interested in making a heavily aesthetic product that is pretty different to what other people are interested in making. So I think this is sad. And I'm always sad when something is in proper development for sort of 3 years and just never comes out.
Yeah. I also like this kind of concept where you take, LA Noire had some sort of new paradigm stuff and they were going to take that and put it in a new setting. I always like that. Settings are so important in this kind of game, and that kind of exploring this idea, it was going to be Western police sort of engaging in China under communism. It's sort of a really interesting idea. Probably not the most commercial idea, which is probably why it was cancelled, and always these games tend to have fairly tortured dev cycles, so difficult.
Yeah, it's definitely sad, but on to the next one, really.
PC Gamer have an article about how the W, A, S and D keys became the standard keys for controlling character movement on the PC. Not surprisingly, it was the competitive scene around id Software's games such as Doom, Quake and Quake 2 that popularised the control scheme. WASD, Ian Hardingham.
Yeah, wow, this is pretty cool, actually. Having a look back on this, I held out with the arrow keys for a pretty long time.
Of course you did.
I don't think I moved over to WASD until the late noughties, mid-late noughties.
Yeah.
When I just got bored of having to rebind everything when I started playing a new game. And I actually did some little tests. I actually compared the arrow keys, to WASD. A lot of people say it's better for WASD because you don't have to sort of have your arms sort of weirdly shifted. That's true, but I think there's somewhere natural for your thumb to go on the space bar with WASD, and there just isn't with the arrow keys. So I think it's clearly superior.
Yeah.
I reject ESDF. It's really nice having a larger shift key under your middle finger. Little finger.
Yep.
But yeah, this was like a nice little excuse to go down memory lane and remember that Quake. Quake was like, hey, look at this new mouse look thing.
Yeah.
Mouse look is so huge, and you really definitely think of Quake as being a mouse look game. So it's really weird to remember that when it was released, people weren't on board.
Yeah, didn't you have to enable it with like a console setting?
I think you had to enable it in the options menu for Quake.
Right,
and in the console for games before Quake. I think.
Yeah, no, you're probably right. No, I remember something about mouse lock. Anyway, I'm sure some nerd will correct us on that. It's interesting. The arrow key thing. I would naturally be drawn to the arrow keys if this was in isolation, because they have a nice sort of discrete boundary around them, and they're arrows. Up goes up and forwards or whatever. So you kind of want that, but the thing with WASD is it's kind of annoying to sort of pick those keys out, again, if you're in isolation. But then, as you say, you have the shift key under your little finger and you have the space bar under your thumb, and that is so useful. And then obviously games have built on that with, your E's and your R's and your reloads and your crouches and so on, all around there. So you need a cluster of keys around there, but it's not sort of naturally what you would do in Abstract at all.
Yeah, I think both of the new keyboards I've got recently came with just literally replacement keys for WASD if you wanted to have them be bright red,
yes,
and sort of slightly larger, so they looked more like they were in sort of a specially designed little area. But yeah, this is cool. I mean, PC gaming, that was an awesome time. I still remember playing a lot of multiplayer Duke Nukem 3D and Shadow Warrior, and it was with a joypad.
Yes.
And that was how you played those games. And Strafe was... I don't think even Strafe was an important thing at the time. So,
yeah.
Those were such an important developmental time for me as a person and for games.
Yeah, it's weird. I still feel like the PC just hasn't quite solved controlling action games yet. I'm just thinking about Overwatch, where you need the E key, that's one of your abilities, and you need shift, that's another one of your abilities, and you need space to jump, and then reload is on R, and I've tried to find a better place to put reload, because you need to reload a lot, and R is just a horrible place for it. You can often hit E by mistake, which is disastrous. It's weird. Like, I still feel like it doesn't quite work, and we've never adopted more than 3-button mice properly ever. Yeah, there's a problem there.
Yeah, I was reflecting on stuff like that. You play Metal Gear Solid 5, for instance, and it does really use all of the buttons on the new PlayStation controller, and there are a lot of buttons on there.
Yeah.
And that's kind of how many you need, and the controls are really excellent at giving you access to all of those buttons really well, and keyboards aren't really. But I don't really know what the answer is, because it's not Valve's controller, probably.
Yeah, no. I think a thumb button on every mouse, a standard that developers can rely on, would be good. Like, you just press in that side of the mouse and you get a button.
But again, it's the lack of being able to guarantee it is the problem.
Right, exactly. Yeah.
Because how far are we away from that being a standard that people can design Overwatch around,
Right. Developers can now apply to get a cut of the revenue from their games being sold on G2A. The company also announced better fraud prevention and analytics tools for developers. G2A, Ian Hardingham.
I'm going to let you take this one off, because you are the GTA specialist of the podcast.
So G2A, in sort of discussion with them, I said originally, and this is something that I wrote about, the one thing that they had to do to change people's perceptions of them was to start giving a revenue share to developers. And they have now done that. That's something I never thought they would do. The way in which they've done it is possibly the most G2A way of doing something of all time. So it's a 10% non-negotiable revenue share that you can get from your games being sold. And what they're doing is they're saying, we're reaching out to developers, we're rolling all this stuff out, you have to be on this program, you can get this, and so on and so on. However, as I've always said again, that had to come with a bunch of other stuff. For example, having your game taken down from their store if you don't want it to be there. They think they're in the legal right with this stuff, so they're not going to ask permission to do it. But if they wanted to build bridges with developers, for a lot of them, being able to have it taken down if you want is a critical component of not feeling like they've effectively stolen your game and taken it away from you. Developers are very emotional. They want to have control of stuff. So I think people have been very down on this. They said it's a publicity stunt. and so on. I think it's a little bit more than that. I think it's designed to make G2A look good, it's designed to make them look like they've legitimized what they're doing, and to some extent I think it's designed to confuse their customers a bit more, to make the customers go, oh, they give a rev share, it's fine, everything's fine. But I also think it might be the start of them trying to set up for the really long term when they will have to do some collaboration with developers on some level.
Yeah, I don't have much to add to that. I mean, I definitely think that developers in general are going to find a way to get around this, and G2A is going to have to contract because the number of games that it can get hold of and the price it can get hold of them will go down. I think I completely agree that this is definitely a lot about confusing consumers and sort of dancing around and looking like they're doing something. I mean, 10% is, I mean, it's complicated. You don't know how much they bought the key for. Yeah. And I don't know where that 10% is definitely off. Is it 10% off the price they're charging their customer? Is it always 10%?
It's 10% of their share.
Right. Well, you see, and that seems a little low. Yeah, I'm much more interested in finding a way of protecting myself from people undermining sales, which is what G2A is. As an impact to me, is a way of undermining my ability to put a game on a flash sale, which is a thing that I like being able to do. So I'm just interested in protecting myself from that, and as long as I'm not being impacted by G2A, if they morph into some other kind of business, then that's okay.
You are very certain that this is going to be solved technically, aren't you? Like that there will be a solid solution that can basically prevent a game being sold in this way.
I think that it will be solved a lot of the time. I'm worried about Humble. I think Humble is going to have to work quite hard if they want to sort this out. Having said that, Humble definitely are big enough to do that. So I think that I don't think G2A is going to go away. But I think that in the next 2 or 3 years, I think measures will be put in place that make G2A's operation significantly harder than it is right now.
Interesting. Okay. Do you think the incentive is there to do that? Because G2A have grown enormously already, and there is now some argument that they are, actually having an effect on the market. At what point does it become something that's like a peremptory concern for everyone?
I think that they've got a problem, which is that their behaviour, it's questionable whether or not it's damaging to developers, but it's definitely upsetting developers. Steam and Humble Bundle do not want to upset developers. They also don't want their business undermined. And those guys are definitely able to unilaterally decide to do something about it. I mean, I think that, to me, Steam started working against G2A earlier than it was an obvious problem in my mind.
Yes.
We started seeing a complete change in how Steam handled CD keys sort of 2 or 3 years ago. So they've been on this before it became like a massive outcry. So I definitely think they are fully motivated to sort it out. I think Humble, I don't know whether they are fully motivated or they just want to do enough to not annoy people. I think both would be fine. I just don't know which of those two things it is.
Yeah.
I think this is just one of those things, honestly, where you're going to cut off a lot of the source material for G2A, and suddenly one day they're going to find a lot of their wells drying up. That's just honestly how I think it's going to work for them.
Sure. Yeah. No. I mean, I can buy that. It's interesting, and if that doesn't happen, then we're really in a new place with this stuff. And I think, again, we're still waiting for the legal challenge. There's going to be some publisher who feels sufficiently incentivized to take them to court. That will happen eventually, unless these technical measures come in before that.
Yeah, Activision or Valve may well do that. I mean, another part of this is that sales are getting less effective. That your income from Steam sales and stuff is a little bit less affected than it was before.
Yep.
But Steam care massively about them, so they're not going to go down. I mean, again, I may be wrong, but my current very strongly held opinion is that it's not going to be very hard for Steam to sort this out. Whereas it might be hard for Humble to sort this out. So I don't think this is difficult enough that there might be some question of whether Steam are motivated enough to do it.
Yeah. Again, I still find that the whole thing so fascinating. This very aggressive business that's predicated on exploiting perceived legal ambiguity, and also predicated on things like people not reading EULAs and stuff, behavior that we all know happens completely across the board, coming in and doing this massive thing, and then now trying to consolidate that position. Seeing what they're doing is very interesting. Again, I do think developers should applaud them for talking to developers at all. I think that there is one route they could go, where they're the sort of fuck everyone route, where they just ignore everything. Kinguin do that. So I feel like this is a different type of thing now. And yes, as you say, there'll be some technical developments, I'm sure. I'm just interested to see where this goes next and where they go next.
I mean, right now I'm sort of uninterested in everything that they are saying to developers. I'm not kind of particularly praising them for doing it or otherwise. I still view them as the stuff they're offering as being not particularly useful to me, and definitely not a ability for me to profit particularly, because I still think that their activities are taking away more revenue than that 10% would add. I could imagine them finding some weird, you talked about them being like Napster. I could imagine them finding a post-Napster area where they've created this brand of being cheap, and developers just let them sell their games cheaply 1 week a month. And that's just what their storefront is, and it's just they give us 70% like everyone else does. But they've just created this sort of slightly different storefront. If they merge into that, then I would love to leverage all of the huge number of G2A customers in a way that's actually profitable to me. But this is not that.
Do you think people are going to go for this deal?
I think if we're not interested, I would be really surprised if there were many other people. This is the kind of thing, if there was any kind of juice here, I think you and me would be like, let's try it. And I think if we're not saying let's try it, I think there won't be that many other people who are willing to be aggressive enough to try it.
So the reasons that... Yes, sorry, please go
unless people have just given up on the idea that they can stop G2A, which I haven't.
The reasons that we can't do this are sort of in various orders. I think it would be, this is something that actively undermines what Valve are doing. And we wouldn't want to be part of that. Not just because of the fact that we make the overwhelming majority of our money from Valve, but also because of the way that they conduct themselves. I feel like that would be inappropriate to do. And the other reason for me is that you are endorsing behavior that a lot of developers, whether it calls them active damage or not, find offensive, and is predicated on this manipulation of customers, and they're all things I don't believe in. So for
both those things are completely true, but we would have a different discussion about it if we also thought this would be a really interesting revenue stream. It just seems to lack a kind of a possibility that this would suddenly introduce a huge amount of revenue that would be interesting to look at. Maybe that's wrong. I mean, I completely agree with both of those things.
We would probably have a more serious conversation about it. The fact that they're asking... and if I hadn't done research into it, I wouldn't understand the fact that the store is about asking people to break a contract.
Right.
And doing that by stealth. And that's wrong. It's just wrong to do that. And I wouldn't be happy associating ourselves with that because it's not clear. It's... you can sell... There is a sort of boundary of things that they're okay to do when you sell someone something. You can talk it up. You can compare other things that are not as good to make someone feel like they want to buy it. You can do that kind of psychology. But you can't make people, you can't lie to people. And that's kind of what they're doing.
I agree with that. I remember a story a long time ago. There was a developer who released his game on the Pirate Bay, I think.
Yes,
Who actually launched his game, or possibly paid for a bunch of advertising on the Pirate Bay.
McPixel was the game.
That's right. So I can totally imagine someone doing this.
Yeah.
And then being like, you can only buy my game from G2A. I could definitely imagine someone doing that. I don't think a lot of people are going to do that.
Yeah, I agree. Twitch has added a new feature called Cheers. Nothing to do with Ted Danson. Apparently you can now bulk buy a Twitch-specific currency called bits and spend them on special animations to include in your chat messages. This is upsetting me already. The cheapest cheer cost $1.20... No, is that 1.26 cents? I believe it is. Surely producer Jimmy's got that wrong. While the most expensive is $140. It is unclear at the moment as to whether the bits are shared with the streamer. Cheers, Ian Hardingham.
Yeah, I feel like one of the jobs of this podcast is to keep you up to date with all of the new strange ways people are making money. So this is actually meaningful. I had a good conversation with Tokyo 42 guys, Sean and Maciek, a couple of months ago about watching Twitch streamers and how people interact with them. And the idea of these little emoticons that you can put into chat, and I think like designing specific ones for a specific streamer or something is kind of a big deal. So yeah, I think this is interesting. I'm kind of finding it hard to imagine being a massive fan of a streamer and sort of spending money to tip them in this way, but I think this is something that a lot of people do. So what do you think?
I don't get this. They already have all that stuff with subscriptions, so they will have, specific icons that you can use, specific emoticons, and then if you subscribe to a streamer, you get your subscriber-only ones, which might be based on amusing phrases that the streamer says or sort of stupid memes. So I don't really get, this is the kind of nickel and diming one. I mean, obviously they've got these $140 ones. Someone will buy that, I'm sure. But the subscribing to a channel thing always seemed to be better to me, and it feels like this undermines that somehow.
Yeah, I guess maybe they're just trying to get the market of people who refuse to subscribe.
Sure, yeah, that could be it.
That's definitely possible. I mean, if I'm a huge fan of a streamer, I may well not want to subscribe for some reason, but I might be feeling generous and give them $10 this, if that's how this works.
Yeah.
The online world is still really weird.
Yeah, this might be another thing where they're kind of rolling it out and seeing what they can do. I mean, donations on Twitch are really big, so maybe they're trying to move people away from donations to a system that goes through them directly.
Right.
That could be it. I'm not quite clear as to why they wouldn't just handle the donations, though, as opposed to
and why they would call it Cheers. Because it seems more like a tip or a donation. It'd be fine for them to handle donations. Maybe this is their thing. We'll have to keep an eye on it. It's a bit strange.
It's interesting. Sony have forced one of their players to change their online ID. Jihad Al-Mafado was using his first name as his PSN ID until Sony banned the account early last month as they deemed it potentially offensive. After his story reached the front page of Reddit, Sony decided to unban his account and allowed him to change the username instead. Your thoughts?
My moral compass is kind of just flapping around. I can't work out what I think about this. I mean, of course it's bad for you not to be able to use your real, genuine first name on PSN. That's bad. That would make me sad, especially if I already had a first name that had some difficult connotations that I had to deal with every day. On the other hand, I kind of buy Sony needing to ban usernames it finds offensive. What do you think?
Yeah, this is very difficult, and you can get into obviously very complicated linguistic conversation here because there is, the innate sort of content of innate content. There is the sort of received content of a word and its complexity and its etymology, and then there's the way it's perceived, within certain cultures and the way that people will read it most readily. You have to have word lists to stop people making horrible user IDs. The only sane way of dealing with that is with a word list. I mean, this is very, very difficult. They've allowed him to change the name to something, I believe, which still contains... No, he's had to not use his name, actually. So he's had to change his ID to something else. I mean, I suppose I think that's fair enough. This is a very, very difficult class of things to ban in a word list. Very difficult and controversial, and people are going to complain about it anyway, irrespective of the fact that this is this guy's name.
Yeah, I think it's a nasty area, and I probably just about side with the best of a bunch of bad solutions.
Yeah,
allowing them to ban names, even if it is, even if you're using it in a way which isn't meant to be offensive, they have to keep control. And a lot of people want to abuse these systems, and in order to have an effective thing against that, they have to make these rules. So I think it's a tough situation, but I probably think Sony is probably doing the right thing.
We've talked about this before. People are going to fall down the cracks of these kind of blanket bans on words, but there is literally no other solution. You have to have it to make a sort of sane, sanitary place to interact with other people, and it's going to be annoying. I mean, I think that they should allow a better system of ID change. If you get into one of these situations for a good reason, which could happen again, not just to this person, but I'm sure it's happened to a lot of other people, you should be allowed to change the name. Maybe you should have to apply to them, maybe you should have to send them an email and say, hey, this is my name, and then it's changed. But forcing this guy to go online and sort of make a huge fuss about it and create this big issue and get on the front page of Reddit, that's not a good system. So they need a good system for the changes.
Yeah, I agree. They should any account names that they find to have one of their offensive words in it, they should immediately change it themselves, and then give the user an ability to change it to something else in their own time. I think that's probably the right solution, rather than having to have some massive email conversation with them.
Right. Yeah. I actually think this hard coding of a name to an account is something that Blizzard have solved very well. You have your Blizzard ID, and then you have your name. And you have a limited number of name changes, I think, per game, though possibly per account. And then if you want more, you have to buy them. And I think that's a perfectly good solution to this. I think people should be allowed to sort of freely change their ID, but just not in an unlimited way.
Yeah, absolutely. Follow Blizzard on that one. That works perfectly. Well, at least.
According to Eurogamer, Goddess is no longer being worked on. Can I just say, I really hate the name Goddess. It's such an awful name. I don't know why I hate it so much, and I don't care to investigate that. Their sources have informed them that the game is no longer being worked on, and almost the whole of 22 Cans is working on a different game called The Trail. Goddess lead developer Konrad Nazinski parted ways with 22 Cans earlier this year. Is Goddess the greatest gaming disaster of our age, Ian Hardingham?
I also don't like the name Goddess.
Horrible
it's
name.
Annoying to say. Greatest gaming disaster. Well, I mean, it's up there. It's got a flatmate of it on the list. Is another Molyneux creation called Creation, but that was sort of vaporware that was never released. In terms of sort of games that actually got released and turned out to be a complete nightmare, I don't know if I can think of many that are as bad.
No, me neither.
The thing that really annoys me about Goddess, one of the many things, it's sort of it's a very cynical looking game. Populous was such a fantastically sort of authentic PC experience. It was something so exciting about the abilities you had. You could really reform the environment. It was just a very exciting thing to play, and it had very exciting graphics for me. Goddess looks very much like it's targeted at much more mainstream crowd. I think, to me, they got the balance wrong there. And I think it's just ended up sort of being, as everyone knows, a complete and utter disaster. I'm basically glad they've stopped working on it. I don't think any human should spend any more time working on this game.
No, it's such a weird combination of things. It was trying to do so many things. A Populous reboot done properly with nice modern stuff would have worked and was what people wanted, and they just it just displayed so many bad traits of what was going on at the time with both Kickstarter and with Lionhead / 22 Cans. I think you're right. Nobody should work on this anymore. If it's dead, that's a good thing.
Yes, we want it to die.
Kickstarter is a poor replacement for publishing in many ways, according to Ben Kuchera at Polygon. He also says that we, as in people who kickstart things, are bad publishers. Possibly inspired by the recent Mighty No. 9 brouhaha, he argues that it limits developer freedom by requiring them to stick to their original pitch and provides no methods for extra funding in case of emergency. There's also a more direct relationship between backers and publishers than there is between customers and publishers. I think producer Jimmy might mean backers and developers there, which can cause friction. Kickstarter, Ian Harding.
Yes, hello, Mr. Kuchera. Nice to read a post by you.
He's back.
Well, I mean, it's quite a lot of straightforward points in here. I think it's good to talk about the ways in which a Kickstarter game is different to a published game, as you touched on most of them in the introduction here. You know, the really negative side, I think, probably is that I think 1A and 1B. 1A is the lack of experienced oversight that is somewhat disconnected from your company. That can often be very helpful. And 1B is the inability to cancel something, as we were just talking about with Goddess. Sometimes games need to be cancelled, and it's extremely hard to have to cancel a game that's been kickstarted for very obvious reasons. And that can sometimes just be the worst thing for everyone. You know, in some ways, though, it's still a bit of a simplistic take, this article, I think. The advice given at the end is don't give any Kickstarter money that you wouldn't be comfortable losing. I mean, I think that's surely got to be understood at this point. With Kickstarter, that this is no sure thing, and you're going to be as likely to lose your money or the game end up being quite bad as you are to have something good. And it's not, you know, you're not laying out a lot of money. You're laying out, I presume, an amount of money you can afford to kickstart something you believe in, and have a little, and you own a little piece of it because you get to tell your friends that you kickstarted it, and that's cool. That's actually worth something to a lot of people. So you're actually getting something back straight away. A thing that people often don't talk about. It's not really like publishing a game. I think that we've talked endlessly. Games are really hard to make, and even the most experienced developers sometimes fail when they don't have a publisher to crack the whip and tell them when they're doing something stupid.
Yeah, as usual with Mr. Kuchera's output, some of which I like. I do like his writing more than a lot of people. He's gone for this very hard take. You know, Kickstarter's made us bad publishers, and then he's kind of equivocated and sort of. You know, there's stuff like, we're risk-averse and will often give the most money and resources to proven games and personalities. You know, I don't know about you, but that sounds like a description of quite a good publisher to me.
Exactly.
A publisher that goes around taking all the risks and giving loads of money to unproven developers is probably not going to do that well. Just a thought there. So
I suddenly feel like a great publisher.
Right, there's some stuff in there like this which kind of makes you go, huh? But the key point, yes, is that, you know, you enter into this weird relationship. You kind of have this enormous sort of elephant on your back of these people who've paid money and they want a specific thing, and you carry that around with you, and you can't cancel it, of course, which is bad. As Tim Schafer says in the article, you don't get any of the good things that you get from a publisher, like being insulated from all the nonsense. You still have to do that. You still have to do your own marketing. So not only have you had to market to this group of people already, you've then got to meet their expectations while marketing to a whole huge other new group of people. And still keep them happy. That's a nightmare, and it's one of the reasons we haven't done a Kickstarter, is because I don't even want to think about that. That sounds awful to me.
Well, I mean, there are a couple of aspects there. If you actually kickstart for the amount of money you need to finish the product, then different. You know, you can kind of have a different approach to actually releasing the thing. And certainly, I think beyond all else, if I'm kickstarting something, it would be nice to know that hitting the level of money they're asking for will actually be enough, which it so rarely is. I mean, it's one of many funding avenues for people, and most people kickstarting nowadays, from experienced teams anyway, are very happy for Kickstarter to produce 30% of the budget and get the other 70% from maybe an early access release, maybe other kinds of investment, and that's just, you know, that is much less attractive to me as a person, as a Kickstarter, because I want this to be the way they're getting funded. I don't want to have 1/3 of the pool, the group of people who kickstarted. I'd like it to be where we've given you enough money so you can pay yourself and everyone else to finish this game, and hopefully it'll turn out well. But that's just like an emotional, personal feeling.
I feel like I don't know what would get me to kickstart a game now. I mean, I did with Satellite Rain. That was an enjoyable experience. But now I feel, it's so problematized. We've really seen the big failures happening. There's an interesting psychological thing where you look at a system and you go, I know that this will fail in this specific way. And it's so different from when you understand that to when you see it actually happening. And now we've seen it happening. That makes me never want to kickstart a game again.
Well, I was thoroughly happy to kickstart Midair.
Yeah.
And I'm really looking forward to getting my first beta of that. There's definitely a very narrow range of things in terms of both concept and scope that I'm willing to kickstart. I'm still willing to kickstart. You're right. I think Kickstarter really, everything that people said was going to go wrong went wrong.
Yeah.
That was not a thing people got calls wrong on so much. And that is really interesting. I mean, I feel like the same was probably true of OnLive eventually, although no one's massively clear exactly why OnLive failed.
Yeah.
I Midair was the only game I've ever kickstarted, and I find it hard to believe that something else will come up. You know, if it was a Spelunky sequel, I would indeed fund it. Right. But there are only a very few things that I would get involved with. It would have to be an IP I was already attached to. I can't imagine falling so in love with a completely new concept that I would want to kickstart it, just personally.
Are there many books that are kickstarted, as in fiction?
I haven't come across a lot.
I'm sort of surprised by that, actually.
Yeah, that seems like something that should happen all the time. I mean, it's kind of relatively cheap to make a book. These publishers can probably... these writers can probably write a new book in a year, and they can probably do that for... $25,000, $30,000. It's not that much, and they've got a huge rapid fan base, so it must be happening.
Yeah, I just wondered if because you're a very sort of avid consumer of sci-fi, and you're quite sort of
I am. Maybe because I think publishers are still kind of alive and well with sci-fi. So I think that's kind of where it's predominantly happening. And maybe they don't use Kickstarter, maybe they use something else. But no, I don't know anything about it.
Yeah, it's interesting. I was just thinking, something that I feel is more secure. And you're right, yes, maybe I'd go for something from, somebody I know. Maybe I literally know them, or I sort of know their track record as a developer, and it's something very obvious. I think that could tempt me into doing a game again, certainly. But yeah, something like that where it's sort of clearly more manageable. Maybe it's one person, Kickstarter. That's enough of that. No Magic Corner. And
no Magic Corner.
No film and television lounge area.
Well, I can create a very small, off-the-cuff one.
Okay.
I've almost finished People vs. OJ, and I am massively enjoying it.
Yeah. Now, I watched
Did
the
you bounce
first episode of that. I really liked it. I don't know why I didn't... I mean, David Schwimmer was interesting. That was the only sort of raised eyebrow from me. But no, it was good. I enjoyed it.
Because the whole story is so crazy that they've got so much material. Like, they don't have to make things up or over dramatize things. Everything that happened easily fills the amount of time they've got, and they just hired a bunch of really awesome actors and filmed it in a really schlocky TV movie way. Just like one of the most enjoyable popcorn things for ages.
Yeah, no, you're right. I should pick that up again. That was definitely decent. I'm still watching The Wire, which is The Wire, and I'm just grateful to the universe that I haven't finished every single episode of it. Like, it's so frustrating when you have something like that. Like, I've watched every episode of The West Wing now, which I love. I know you're not as big on that, but like, there's nothing else like that exists that's good. Even Sorkin's other stuff doesn't touch that, so I can't have that anymore. It's gone forever, and that's sort of a bit sad. But yeah, so I'm still enjoying that. I'll tell you something actually. Something that kind of I was thinking about was the guy who won his match unexpectedly in the first round of Wimbledon, like massively unexpectedly, and then went and lost to Federer in the second round. And the whole story with him like playing against Federer and like this being this big deal, and him actually playing the match quite well and having some interesting points and so on. I just thought, like, that guy now is the prime target for selling his story for a film. Like, that is an amazing film to do that. And Federer is at the point of his career where he would definitely be in that film playing himself. So I just think that is kind of begging for it. It's got all the makings of like the low-key indie film, because it's quite triumphant, but it ends with him losing, but it's a moral victory and so on.
Yeah, he won 7 matches in a row as well, so there's a lot of like matches the film could have.
Yep.
It's a pity that his match against Federer didn't have more drama in it. however.
That's true. You could inject some there. You could. That's fixable in post. But it's rare that you see a sort of real life story and you go, that is actually just a film. It's not even real life. There we go. That's the end of that. I hit the bell ceremonially. It's time to go back in time to 2006. Would you believe? For the games that were released this week in 2006, thanks to Eurogamer. And producer Juby back on duties this week. I hated doing this last time. I'm very glad he's back. On the 29th of June 2006, we've got Panzer Command Operation Winter Storm on the PC. Seems to be no shortage of Tank Command games. On the 30th of June 2006, we've got AND1 Street Ball. Now, if anything this week needs a stealth Google, it's going to be that. So
well, I'm presuming it's a basketball game, and one is a sort of relatively unusual free throw that you take after being fouled on your way to making a made basket.
Oh, and as in it's an and one, I see.
Yeah.
Right. It's and one Street Ball. It's one of those things. There was NBA Street was a thing, wasn't it?
I've just found out and one is actually a footwear company as well.
Oh, I see.
So
okay.
This is definitely branded by that footwear company.
Yeah, these super kind of trendy brand tie-in games was such a thing a few years ago. You don't quite see them as much anymore. Of course, Mark Echo's getting up contents under pressure is the ultimate one of those. Never be defeated.
I miss it.
That's enough of that. Brick 'em All on the DS, which just,
of all the things that could be, I bet it's just a Breakout clone.
We have some Brick 'em All. Devil May Cry 3 Special Edition on the PC while you look up Brick 'em All. Is that definitely
a Breakout clone?
Good, okay. Flat Out 2 on the Xbox, PS2 and PC. Never played a Flat Out game. I think they were a bit lost in the mix. Micro Machines version 4 on the PC, PS2 and PSP.
So I really liked Micro Machines V3 on the PC. Right. I really got into it, but V4 turned me off.
Was it 2D? 3?
It was 3D, but it was sort of fairly charming 3D.
Right.
V3 was.
Okay.
Yeah, if you search it looks a lot more kind of cool and nice than V4 does.
I never progressed beyond Micro Machines 2, but it was important to me. New Super Mario Brothers on the DS. One of probably your most hated Mario game, I think.
Certainly one of them.
Yeah.
Although the one on the Wii U where the enemies jump in time to the music.
Yes.
There was a special place in hell reserved for whoever thought that was a good idea.
Over G Fighters on the 360. That sounds like a plain dogfighting game to me. I wonder if that's...
It sure does.
We can take a look at that. I'm just really into finding out what these things are today. Yes, it is. Plain dogfighting is something that... This really looks a lot like Strike Commander visually, which is not a good thing, but also Strike Commander is my favourite flight sim. Yeah. I'm still obsessed with the fact that nobody's done the Wing Commander, Strike Commander like a sim game with a personality thing in this recent rash of spacey games. I mean, it's not going to be Star Citizen, that's for sure. Star Citizen looks boring as all hell. Shinobido, Way of the Ninja on the PS2. I guess that's a ninja game. Super Monkey Ball Adventure on the PS2, GameCube, and PSP. Did you play that?
No. Pretty sure this had got way into the bad Monkey Ball games, though.
Yeah. Titan Quest on the PC. I never played that.
No, Diablo clone. I know that. But...
Oh no! Hang on. Wait a minute. Let me just check this out. Oh no, it's not the thing I thought it was. Okay. Untold Legends: The Warrior's Code on the PSP. Don't know.
Yes.
Don't care. That's enough of that.
Don't care either.
We catapult ourselves ingloriously into the present day to take a look at the top 10 UK Steam games. And at number 10, it's Arma 3 with 50% off. Number 9 is Fallout 4 with 50% off. Number 8 is Rocket League registered trademark with 40% off. Number 7 is Dark Souls Trademark 3 with 25% off. Number 6 is Dead by Daylight, 10% off, just released. Now, further to our conversation about Dead by Daylight, I have actually watched this now on a stream. I watched Ko, who is probably my favourite general streamer, really like Ko, and Yeah, it's really weird. It looks really old. It looks like a bad sort of almost Quake era game. The graphics are terrible. Wow. And it is this weird thing. So most of the players are running around in third person. Like, I think they're trying to do something. I can't remember what they are, but they were sort of in this big warehouse environment trying to sneak around. And the killer is in first person. It's like you sneak up on people, you bop them on the head, and then you drag them and like impale them on a spike and stuff. And you set traps to try and stop them getting into certain areas. It's a really interesting design. It's pretty sort of hardcore horror-y. So that's going to turn a lot of people off. It certainly turned me off. There's a lot of screaming involved, which is unpleasant. But yes, it is worth considering on above the level which we considered it previously. Number 5 is Doom, 40% off. Number 4 is The Witcher Registered Trademark 3 Wild Hunt, 50% off. Number 3 is Ark Survival Evolved at 45% off. Number 2 is Counter-Strike Global Offensive at 50% off. And number 1 is Grand Theft Auto 5 because it's a sale. And apparently there are 12 people in the world who haven't bought Grand Theft Auto 5 yet. And that's 40% off. What a boring... that is the most boring top 10 we've had since we started the top 10. I think.
Boring.
That's it. We don't have any listener questions this week because I am a lazy and bad human. But we hope
both of those things sometimes.
We do hope that you would like to send in some listener questions for next time, and you can do that on Twitter until I get a system for that actually works, which one day I will. That's enough of that. Thank you very much for listening. I'm Paul Kilduff-Taylor. You can follow me at Mode7Games on Twitter, and he's Ian Hardingham. Goodbye.
Thank you and goodbye.
That's it, children. Time for bed. Don't forget to pay us a visit at www.visitingthevillage.com.